Bifocal Chapter 12 J. I shifted along the line. I was moving towards the spot where their quarterback was looking. That was the key. Watch the eyes of the quarterback to figure out where you should be. It was an obvious passing situation. Last down and 12 to go, so I was going to drop back into coverage and not worried about the run. Actually, I wasn't going to worry about anything. There were less than 2 minutes to go, and we were up 84-10. I'd never been in a blowout like this before. And here was the question. Why were the starters still out? This was ridiculous. Playing us during garbage time? Give the second stringers some playtime and let the rest of us rest and not risk getting injuries. This was stupid. I wasn't sure if Coach was trying to punish the other team or us for not playing hard enough last game. Either way, it was stupid, and I was angry about still being in the game. Their quarterback called out signals, and I started in toward the line, faking a blitz. As the ball was snapped, I backpedaled until I reached the space by the sideline where he'd been staring. A running back slipped out of the backfield through our linemen and into the flat. I slowed down slightly. I didn't want to rush the play. I wanted the quarterback to think he was open. The running back stopped and turned around, and the ball came floating through the air towards him. I had to time this right. The pass was soft, wobbling, and high. He jumped up into the air to make the catch, and just as the ball reached his fingers, I leaped into the air and drove into him. He groaned as he was propelled backwards, my arms around him, the ball popping loose. He smashed into the ground with me on top of him. I felt his body compress under our combined weight, and he sank into the turf. There was a split second of silence. Then the crowd exploded. "Nice try," I said. I pushed off against the ground and got up. My teammates mobbed me and the crowd continued to yell. I offered him a hand to get up. He just lay there, not moving. The ref blew his whistle and signaled for their bench to send somebody out. He was hurt. He lay there on the ground, still, not moving. And then he moved. Thank goodness he moved. He was okay. He rolled onto his side, he curled his legs up like he was in pain, and he held one arm tightly against his body. He was hurt. Maybe something was broken? I didn't mean to hurt him. I just hit him. Suddenly I was pushed sideways by a two-handed shove. One of their players hit me. "You jerk," he yelled at me. He was so mad he was practically spitting at me through his face guard. That was a cheap hit. 2 of our players knocked him over. Before I could even think to react, another one of their players started shoving. All 4 refs came running over and tried to separate everybody. The refs blew their whistles like crazy and grabbed players by their jerseys to pull them apart. I just stood there, staring, taking in everything. I hadn't done anything wrong. It was a fair hit. He had the ball. It wasn't whistled down by the refs as a penalty. Slowly the kid got to his feet, supported by one of the coaches. He was holding his one arm with the other. It looked like a collarbone had snapped. "It was a good hit," one of my players yelled. "Clean hit." The refs called a timeout, and the coaches signaled for some changes. He took me off. I was glad to be finally gone, but part of me wanted to stay on. If somebody else wanted to make something of this, I didn't want them to think that I was running. At the end of the game, as we walked down the line shaking hands, I heard some grumbling about our team being bad sports, bad winners. I waited for somebody to say something about my hit, but nobody did. When I passed by the kid I'd hurt, I told him I hoped he'd be okay soon. He told me it was a clean hit. That showed class. Much more class than their coach. He had words with our coach after the game. I understood why they were upset. It hadn't felt good putting such a beating on them, but we did what we had to do. Besides, it sure beat the heck out of being a bad loser. If they were big enough to play, they were big enough to swallow a loss, no matter how bad. Just suck it up, take it like a man, shake hands, and leave the field. The crowd wasn't as big as we usually had for our home games. I guess I couldn't blame them for not showing up. Nobody liked to support a loser. The Streetsville crowd wasn't much better at losing than their team, and while some of them had left long before the end of the game, the ones who remained yelled out things to us as we passed through the stands towards the dressing room. A couple of those comments were aimed at me. This was one time when keeping my helmet on was a real benefit. It muffled the yelling and protected my head in case somebody threw something down on us as we left the field. As it was, nothing happened. Nobody seemed to want to leave the locker room. The time right after a big victory was even better than the game itself. Not that it had been much of a game. That one was over before it even began. The only question had been how badly were we going to beat them. "Can I have your attention for a minute, please?" Coach Pruitt called out. The noise quickly subsided to silence. A couple of guys came out of the shower wrapped only in towels. Everybody else, dressed, half-dressed, or still in full uniform, sat or stood and waited. Today was a glorious day, if you were wearing a Central uniform. There was a smattering of laughter and cheering. We did what we needed to do, despite what some people might say. We all knew he was referring to the Streetsville coach. We did what we had to do. Losing wasn't an option. That was a war out there, a battle, and why we don't necessarily enjoy crushing somebody to the ground. "I liked watching Jay do it, though," somebody yelled from the back, and everybody laughed. "Sometimes it is good," Coach Pruitt said. "It was a good hit. If they wanted to be angry at anybody, it should have been at their quarterback for throwing up such a lame duck pass. They always blame the quarterback," Kevin yelled out. "And all the glory and all the blame all the time," Steve announced. "Anyways," Coach Pruitt continued, "I know it's better to crush somebody than to be crushed. The lessons you learn from football are the lessons you learn for your life. I remember one of my coaches telling me that you learn more from losing than you do from winning. So I guess our opponents should be thanking us for the education we gave them today." There was more laughter and comments. "Today we gave them all a collective PhD, and when those ratings come out next week, you can count on us not being ranked 5th or 4th or even 3rd. You can even count on us not being ranked 2nd, because 2nd is not an option. We will be ranked where we belong. Number 1. Almost in unison, everybody started cheering. "We're number 1! We're number 1!" The noise kept building and building and building until it wasn't just something coming out of my lungs or into my ears, but filled every part of my body. We were number 1. I waited impatiently for the last few players to leave the locker room. Kevin had to be last, Steve before him, then me. It was one of those unwritten rules, like finishing first when doing laps or wind sprints, or keeping your helmet on while the coach was talking. Those were the things the captain did, things I'd do next year, and teach the guy who would be captain the year after me. "Come on, Moose," Kevin yelled. "Hurry up or you'll miss the bus." "Keep your shirt on," Moose replied. "We have our shirts on. Get a move on." Slowly Moose stood up. He pulled on his shirt and grabbed his equipment bag. He took a few steps and staggered, almost falling down. Steve grabbed Moose by the arm and helped him to the bench. "You okay?" Kevin asked anxiously as he stood over top of him. "Yeah, just got a little lightheaded, that's all. It looked like you were going to faint. I'm okay." "Jay, get him something to drink. Some Gatorade," Kevin ordered. "No," Moose said abruptly. "Nothing to drink. I can't have anything to drink during Ramadan." "Ramadan?" Steve asked. "Is that like diabetes or something?" Kevin shook his head. "Steve, sometimes you amaze me." "Sometimes I amaze me, too. But what's that got to do with diabetes?" "Ramadan is a special time in the Muslim calendar," Moose said. "For a month, we have to be more observant of our faith." "So what's that got to do with you almost fainting?" Steve asked. "For the whole month, we can't drink or eat." "You can't eat for a whole month? That's impossible," Steve said. "I can hardly survive until 4th period for lunch." No. We eat and we drink. We just can't do either between sunrise and sunset," Moose explained. "For the whole month?" Steve said, repeating it like he didn't believe his ears. Moose nodded. "We eat a big meal for breakfast with lots to drink. Then we fast all day until we have another big meal as soon as the sun sets." "No wonder you almost fainted," Kevin said. "You can't play a football game without drinking something." "You can. I have. This is week 3 of Ramadan, and my 3rd game." "What happened today?" "I slept in this morning and didn't have a chance to drink enough before the sun came up. It was hot today and Coach Pruitt played me until the 4th quarter. "Why didn't you tell him to take you out?" I asked. "I couldn't. I didn't tell him about any of this. I was afraid he wouldn't play me at all." He paused. "You guys aren't going to tell him, are you?" We waited for Kevin to answer. Whatever he said, we'd all go along with it. It was much easier than actually having to form our own opinion. "Just one more week, right?" Kevin asked. "One more." "And you'll drink and eat more before that game and the rest of the practices, right?" "I won't make that mistake again," Moose said reassuringly. "We're a better team with you on the field than off," Kevin said. "This stays in the locker room, okay?" he asked, turning towards me and Steve. I nodded. "Count on it." "No question," Steve said. "Then come on, let's get going." Moose got up and Steve took his one arm. "Carry his bag," Kevin ordered. "You two stay close to him on the bus, and I'll drive him straight home from school." We had been the last on the bus. and we wanted to be the last off. We wanted to wait until Coach Pruitt and the other 3 assistants were inside of the school in case Moose had another little stumble. It was also better that nobody else on the team saw it either. "How are you feeling?" I asked Moose. "I'm feeling okay, just really hungry and thirsty. What time is it?" "Almost 6. Then I don't have to wait very long. Sunset is at 6:25 today." "That early? Are you sure?" Steve asked. "Believe me, if you were fasting all day, you'd know exactly when sunset happens." "We'll have to have you home by then," Kevin said. "Let's go." We got up and walked off the bus. All 3 of us watched him pretty carefully. "I'm just parked over there," Kevin offered. "I'll have to go to my locker," Moose said. "Homework." "Forget the homework," Steve said. "Can't. I have a calculus test tomorrow. I need my book." "Forget it. So you get an 80 instead of a 90. Big deal." "It's more like a 40 instead of a 60. I need to pass to stay on the team." "I thought all brown people did well in math," Steve said. "That's Chinese people," Moose said. "Most of the brown people in my class do pretty good." "Not all. It's a stereotype," Moose said. "Sort of like all black people can dance." "That one's true," Steve joked. "Yeah, right," Kevin said. "Obviously you've never seen yourself on video." "Look who's talking. I can bust a move, and you look like all of your moves are busted." "I need my textbooks," Moose said again. "Fine. We'll get you your textbooks." Kevin shook his head slowly. "Anybody else need to get something from their locker?" "Yeah, right. Like I'm going to study," Steve snorted. "Me neither." "Good. You 2 walk him to his locker, and I'll pull the car around the back and meet you there." We started for the school while Kevin went for the car. Moose was moving slowly, but he seemed pretty solid on his feet. We entered the school. It was once again that quiet time I liked so much. The school was deserted. Some of the lights were out, making the halls dim. We headed towards the shop classes. Moose's locker was, of course, in the brown corridor. I was grateful for that. The rest of us had lockers by the gym, close to the gym office. The coaches usually stayed there after every game going over film. Moose's locker was nowhere near them. We passed by Azim's gaping locker. The police tape might have been all gone, but the missing door pretty well marked the spot. I wondered if they'd found anything in it. If they had, we probably would have heard about it on the news. That was the only way we would have heard about it. Still nothing from the school. "Here it is," Moose said. "How come you're having trouble in calculus?" Steve asked. "My parents think it's because I'm wasting too much time playing football," he said as he removed a book. "Playing football isn't wasting time," Steve said firmly. "Tell that to my parents. They think that anything under a 90 is a disgrace to the family. If I pulled off a 90, my parents wouldn't know whether to throw me a party or have me tested for performance-enhancing drugs." "Maybe they'd do both," I suggested. Moose slammed his locker closed and clicked the lock back on. We went down the corridor towards the back doors where Kevin would be waiting. "A Big Mac," Steve said. "No, make that 2 Big Macs." "What about 2 Big Macs?" I asked. "That's the first thing I'd eat if I hadn't eaten all day. 2 Big Macs, and a big order of fries, and the biggest Coke they have." "The Coke and fries sound good, but I don't eat meat," Moose said. "You're a vegetarian?" I asked. "Normally I eat some meat, but none during the holy seasons like Ramadan." We opened the door and took 2 steps before we skidded to a stop. Standing in the middle of Browntown were Mr. Atkins and one of the vice principals, and a couple of teachers, some kids, and one of the caretakers and 2 cops. For a second I thought about turning us around and heading back into the school, but the principal saw us and motioned for us to join them.